Inside a prestigious academy, a voice summons someone named Shootwright. He's called into the head office only to be told he's fired. This is Werner Shootwright, an associate professor at the Sages Academy. The man delivering the news seems almost pleased with himself. Werner can't believe what he's hearing, demanding clarification. The headmaster of the academy simply looks down on him, calling him foolish. Desperate for answers, he confronts a woman, demanding to know why. The explanation he receives is cold and calculated. The academy, he's told, is the heart of the Empire's magical research, and his crime was wasting time on his own research and helping struggling students. Werner tries to reason, explaining he only helped students after his work was done. But the headmaster isn't listening, declaring that his time of being overlooked is over. The woman adds that the previous headmaster favored him, but that protection is now gone. As a final blow, they dramatically unveil a table of his personal research. Werner stares in shock at the collection of his own magical inventions. With a greedy smile, the headmaster claims everything, including the patents for the academy. He's then tossed a few meager belongings, dismissed as nothing more than garbage. They tell him to take his junk and live a quiet, pathetic life somewhere else. He's challenged to even try making a living in the capital, a clear warning. Clutching what little he has left, Werner's despair begins to turn into determination. And with that, Werner Shootwright is cast out from the only home he's ever known. The head of the magic tool department emerges, praising the headmaster's cunning. They gloat over his stolen research, planning to claim it all as their own. With a twisted smile, the headmaster declares the academy is finally his. He orders his subordinate to take Werner's work and complete it immediately. The man confidently claims he can finish it in 3 days with his superior intellect. Werner is then unceremoniously thrown out onto the cold, unforgiving streets. His landlord, under pressure from the academy, promptly evicts him. He finds he's been blacklisted. No shop in the capital will sell him anything. To complete his ruin, even his own money is now beyond his reach. He's literally thrown out of his home with a final, resounding, "never come back." Sitting amidst the rubble of his life, Werner realizes the headmaster's reach is absolute. With nowhere to go, he overhears a commotion down the street. A cart is overturned, shattering a set of custom-made magical lights for the crown prince. The young delivery boy is in tears, his career seemingly over in an instant. Werner approaches the scene, his analytical mind already assessing the damage. The owner shouts at him to stay away, but Werner is already picking up the pieces. His hands move with practiced ease, reassembling the complex magical device. And just like that, he announces it's fixed, because of course it is. The men can only stare in utter shock, unable to comprehend what they just saw. The owner refuses to believe it, calling it an impossible lie. But Werner simply places a hand on the cobblestone street. In a flash of light, every single shattered piece flies back together. He holds up a perfectly restored lamp, stating he's fixed them all. And as a bonus, he casually mentions he improved their efficiency too. The delivery boy examines the device, his eyes wide with disbelief and joy. He falls to his knees, thanking Werner for saving his life and career. The owner begs to repay him, so Werner asks for a simple ride somewhere. Now safely in their cart, he finally has a way to leave his troubles behind. Their destination is a grand estate on the outskirts of the capital. The grateful men drop him off at a grand estate, waving their thanks. Werner reveals this is his family home, a place he left long ago. He defied his father and brother's wish for him to join the military. Now he fears they'll force him into service if they learn he was fired. His only plan is to sneak in, grab his things, and disappear. He slips through a window, hoping his old room is still intact. But as he creeps down the hall, a familiar voice calls his name. He's suddenly pinned to the wall by a very intimidating woman. It's his older sister, and she is clearly not happy to see him. She scolds him for sneaking around and orders him to her room at once. The scene shifts to a quiet room where a meal has been prepared for him. His sister, Birgitta, reveals she already knows everything from a certain Kei-sensei. She scolds him for not contacting her, knowing their family would be furious. Werner can only apologize, admitting he didn't want to be a burden. His explanation is met with a cold, unimpressed stare from his sister. But her stern expression softens into one of fond exasperation. She cuts the lecture short, instead presenting him with a sealed letter. It's from the same Kei-sensei, a long-lived sage who might be able to help. Werner reads the letter, a message from his beloved mentor reassuring him. The sage's solution? An invitation to a countryside hot spring, with her. The letter explains Kei-sensei quit the academy due to back pain, now living in retirement. She predicted this exact outcome, knowing he would be cast out by the time he read her words. She had recommended him as her successor, but knew the new headmaster would find a way to oust him. But she believes this is for the best, freeing him to pursue his research without limits. She praises his brilliant mind and the many revolutionary magical tools he's already created. Her words are a balm to his wounded spirit, a reminder of his true worth. If he has nowhere to go, she offers him her old laboratory out in the countryside. The letter then shifts to its final, most important point, demanding his full attention. And that point is, she's way more impressive than him, a fact she's happy to demonstrate. He finishes the letter, her final words a mix of encouragement and a jab at his reckless nature. Werner considers his new situation, a thoughtful look crossing his face. He realizes he'll need funding, materials, and a capable assistant to truly begin. But before any of that, he knows there's one crucial first step. With a brilliant smile, he decides his first goal is to build his own laboratory. He explains to his sister that to start, he must first create a certain something. Brigitte watches him, a small knowing smile playing on her lips. She's relieved, remarking that the brother she once knew has finally returned. She recalls his youth, defying their father to pursue his passion with hopeful eyes. It was that spark, that unwavering determination, that she had missed the most. She tells him not to worry if no one else understands his dream. She promises that no matter what happens, she will always be on his side. He can always rely on her if he ever finds himself in trouble again. With a final wave and a word of thanks, Werner sets out on his new path. Brigitte watches him go, a look of quiet, knowing pride on her face. Under the sliver of a moon, Werner begins his long journey to the countryside. The path is lonely, with only the wilderness to keep him company. He presses on through the harsh elements, protecting the few things he has left. 2 days later, after a grueling trek, his destination finally comes into view. He's finally arrived, completely out of breath but full of hope. He stands in awe before the laboratory, a testament to his mentor's incredible skill. Eager to begin, Werner reaches for the door, but a loud crash stops him cold. Inside, a young woman is covered in soot, crying out in pain. She screams in terror as a massive red dragon looms over her, ready to strike. The beast's raw power sends her hurtling backwards through the lab. Werner instantly recognizes the creature, a legendary elder dragon. So the new lab comes with a pet, but his sharp eyes notice something is terribly wrong with the scene. There's a strange, spider-like magical device embedded in the dragon's flesh. The woman crashes to the floor as the beast's rampage tears the room apart. Its massive claws swing down, aiming to finish her off for good. She squeezes her eyes shut, bracing for a fate she cannot escape. She opens her eyes, confused to find herself still breathing. A brilliant magic circle erupts, shielding her from the dragon's deadly claw. Werner stands firm, his hand outstretched, holding back the beast's immense power. He calmly notes the strange magical device, a design he's never encountered. The woman can only stare as he tells her he's just going to take a quick look. He analyzes the device's energy, deducing it's a tool for brainwashing. The dragon strains against its bonds, controlled by a master from far away. But analysis is one thing, direct action is another. In a flash, Werner closes the distance between himself and the rampaging beast. He stands before the elder dragon, critiquing the shoddy control on its left side. The dragon's claw grinds against his barrier, dark energy flaring violently. The beast roars in fury, its attack completely nullified by the lone man. Werner smirks, confirming his suspicions about the creature's movements. He notes the slow reaction on its left side, a fatal flaw he can exploit. With a precise strike, he lands a devastating blow right on the dragon's jaw. The woman can only watch from the floor, utterly terrified and confused. In a single glance, he declares he's completely figured out the device's structure. He yanks the woman to safety just as the dragon's massive head slams down. She can only stare blankly, her brain having officially clocked out for the day. Werner calmly diagnoses the problem, a simple case of shoddy wiring. He explains he'll simply remove the brainwashing device from the dragon. With a few quick adjustments, he repurposes it into something entirely new. He's created a low-frequency therapy device, perfect for muscle and nerve pain. Meanwhile, back at the academy, the headmaster is absolutely furious. A full week has passed, and his subordinate has produced absolutely nothing. The man who boasted of his superior intellect is now sweating bullets. He has all of Werner's notes, but the complex theories are completely beyond him. He can't fathom how Werner's mind works, let alone replicate his genius. Years of his own research mean nothing in the face of Werner's innate talent. Back in the lab, the young woman can only wonder who this incredible man is. The woman and an older man can only stare in shock, demanding to know who he is. Werner just smiles, casually mentioning he'll add a strength adjustment switch. For knots. Meanwhile, in a far more opulent setting, a powerful figure receives some troubling news. This is Crown Prince Klaus, and he's just learned of the Academy's foolish decision. His aides agree, lamenting the loss of such a uniquely talented magic tool craftsman. The prince seems genuinely distressed by this turn of events, a deep frown on his face. He tells them they don't grasp the true gravity of the situation. This is a matter of national security. An aide tries to argue that Werner is just an inventor, not a powerful combat mage. The prince silences him, asking if they remember the end of the last civil war, a conflict that ended when a new magic bomb wiped out over 100 rebels instantly. The prince reveals the inventor of that bomb was none other than Werner at age 12. He explains it was originally designed as a simple tool for mining operations, but its test detonation required dozens of court mages just to contain the blast. And if that wasn't terrifying enough, Werner had another trick up his sleeve. With a simple snap of his fingers, he showed them his true potential. He replicated the bomb's destructive power with his own magic 100 times over. The aide is left speechless, finally grasping the gravity of the situation. The prince warns them never to provoke him, a memo the headmaster clearly missed. The scene shifts to a large gate, a silent witness to the coming conflict. An attack comes out of nowhere, a bolt stopping inches from Werner's face. The guards at the capital's main gate announce their post with grim authority. They refuse entry, declaring they won't let such a suspicious-looking group pass. Werner realizes his mistake. He'd grown used to easy passage with his old credentials. All he wants is to start his research, but petty bureaucracy stands in his way. Just then, their recently acquired elder dragon makes a grand appearance overhead. The young woman, still covered in soot, finally introduces herself as Lotte. She asks if Werner knows Kei-sensei, and he confirms their connection. Lotte explains she came here to be Kei-sensei's apprentice after much correspondence. Werner seems to have a moment of sudden, dawning realization. Lotte's face falls as she delivers the devastating news: Kei-sensei is gone. Lotte can only repeat the word, her face a mask of disbelief and horror. Werner clarifies that Kei-sensei is simply at a hot spring, enjoying her retirement. The young apprentice slowly puts the pieces together, her mind racing. She lets out a cry of despair, realizing her dream of an apprenticeship is impossible. With her entire future shattered, Lotte collapses to the ground, utterly defeated. She asks what she's supposed to do now, her voice filled with desperation. Werner considers her plight, suggesting a school in the capital that teaches magic tool creation. He recommends the Sage's Academy, conveniently forgetting to mention the recent hostile takeover. He offers to write her a letter of recommendation, knowing a professor who can help. Lotte looks up, a spark of hope returning to her eyes as she asks if he's serious. Lotte is ecstatic, grabbing Werner's hands in pure, unadulterated joy. But as she celebrates, something slips from Werner's pocket and clatters to the ground. He points out her injuries, questioning if she's really fit to travel alone. Now at the capital gate, Lotte presents her identification to a stoic guard. The guard, however, remains completely unmoved by her plea. She insists the documents are genuine, her face a mask of desperation. He scoffs, dismissing her papers as forgeries not even worth a glance. With a wave of his hand, he tells her to get lost like all the other fakers. In a last-ditch effort, Lotte grabs his arm, begging him to just look. She pleads with him, explaining that she has nowhere else to go. The guard's patience finally snaps, his face contorted with rage. He shoves Lotte aside, calling her a nuisance for wasting his precious time. But before he can go any further, Werner steps in, pulling her out of harm's way. He holds her close, calmly asking the guard if checking IDs is part of his job. Werner tells him to stop judging by appearances and actually investigate the documents. The guard seethes, his pride wounded by the accusation of incompetence. He dismisses their filthy belongings, insisting they must be forgeries. With that, he raises his weapon, deciding to arrest them on the spot for forgery. Werner sighs, noting that if they won't be trusted, he'll have to try another way. And a massive, intricate magic circle erupts from the ground beneath him. He calmly announces he's just going to wash away the filth with a little running water. And with a surge of power, a massive torrent of water erupts from the ground. The arrogant guard is sent flying, completely overwhelmed by the magical tidal wave. Werner dusts himself off, not a single drop on him, declaring that should do the trick. He then casually tells Lotta they're going through, pointing towards the now clear gate. But their path is immediately blocked by a much more imposing figure, the captain of the guard. The first guard scrambles to his feet, desperately trying to explain what just happened. He paints them as criminals who used forged papers and then attacked when confronted. The captain's gaze hardens, focusing on the accusation of forgery. Apparently, that's the real crime here. He demands to see Lotta's identification for himself, and she nervously hands it over. The captain begins to read, muttering that forgery is a very serious offense. But his stern expression shatters, his eyes widening in absolute shock. In a flash, the captain and his men drop to their knees in a deep, reverent bow. He begs Lady Charlotte for forgiveness and promises to open the gate immediately. The first guard is utterly bewildered, asking why they're bowing to criminals. The captain furiously rebukes his men, telling them to prepare for severe punishment. He then turns back to Lotta, offering a personal carriage to take her anywhere she pleases. Werner decides she'll be safe from here, preparing to part ways with his new acquaintance. He hands her the letter of recommendation he promised for the academy. With a final command, he tells the now terrified guard to escort her there personally. He offers her a final word of encouragement, telling her to study hard. Lotta looks up at him, flustered but grateful for his kindness. With a final deep bow of gratitude, she is escorted into the capital. But as he turns to leave, his path is blocked by a new group of onlookers. 5 days later, back at the countryside lab, Werner calls it a day. He holds up a new invention, its completion finally within his grasp. All that remains now is to run a few final durability tests on his creation. But his work is interrupted by a sudden knock at the laboratory door. He wonders who could possibly be visiting him this late at night. The door opens to reveal the same mysterious eye-patch-wearing man from the Capitol gate. Werner doesn't take any chances, preparing a bit of magic just in case. But it's not a threat he finds, but a young woman with horns and wings. Her eyes are distinctly draconic, a clear sign of her true nature. A wide, fanged smile spreads across her face as she whispers with joy. She declares that she's finally been able to meet him properly. She seems completely unconcerned with her lack of attire. She says she feared she'd never see her master again. And with a happy cry, Hadi tackles him in an overwhelming hug. Werner can only look on in shock, completely caught off guard. Which leaves just one very important question. Who is this girl? The scene shifts to a dark chamber where a man kneels in reverence. He reports to a veiled figure on a throne, confirming Werner's identity. The leader asks about the progress of the magic tools from the academy. The kneeling man reveals that development has completely stalled. A vision shows the headmaster celebrating, having failed to deliver on his promises. The leader decides it's better to steal Werner's work directly from his new lab. An older, bespectacled man confidently declares that he is the only one for the job. But the veiled leader turns on the first man, scolding him for his incompetence. The man can only look up in shock, realizing his grave error. A woman steps forward and delivers a swift, brutal punishment for his failure. With a single, brutal swing, she ends the man's life without a second thought. She licks her lips, declaring that their cult has no need for mercy. She promises her own disciple will succeed where the other failed. The leader reveals their true target, a new bomb called the Devourer. The woman asks how they'll handle the weapon that once killed hundreds. The leader's voice echoes with a simple, chilling reassurance. If 100 men failed before, they will simply send 300 more. The scythe wielder vows that she will not fail this mission. Seems like a healthy work environment. The leader gives the order, eliminate the bomb and its creator. An orb reveals their target, Werner, all for the sake of some grand prophecy. Hades clings to him, overjoyed to finally be with her master. Werner, however, is still stuck on a very simple question. Who is she? She has a moment of realization, understanding he only knows her other form. With a mischievous grin, she pulls him along for a little demonstration. In a brilliant flash of light, she reveals her true self. She is Hades, the very same elder dragon he saved from the laboratory, and she's a little too eager to get reacquainted. Personal space is clearly not a dragon concept. She explains that dragons are bound by honor to repay their debts, and since he saved her, she has sworn to serve him for the rest of her life. She won't take no for an answer, declaring it would bring shame upon her entire clan. Werner considers her offer, admitting it's a bit much, but then a thought occurs to him. He suddenly realizes that after days on the road, he probably doesn't smell his best. Hades, ever helpful, appears ready with a towel and a plan. She gleefully announces her first duty as his servant, to wash him clean. A moment later, Werner is completely buried in a mountain of soap suds. She might be a little too enthusiastic. Now clean, he asks if dragons have no concept of shame regarding their nudity. Hadi is genuinely confused, so he explains human customs about personal privacy. She seems to finally grasp the concept, a look of understanding on her face. So, with a puff of smoke, she transforms into a much more manageable form. She declares that when serving him, she will use this adorable, less naked dragon form. Werner squishes her tiny dragon face, reminding her he never actually agreed to this. Hadi panics, listing all the incredible things she can do, like flying and creating massive gems. She then pulls out the ultimate weapon, giant, tear-filled dragon eyes, begging to stay. Werner considers her plea, admitting she doesn't seem malicious and he could use an assistant. With a triumphant wink, Hadi knows she's won him over. He officially agrees, and Hadi asks for confirmation, her voice full of hope. Overjoyed, she nuzzles against his cheek, a tiny dragon full of gratitude. Werner decides to put his new assistant to work immediately, much to her confusion. The scene pulls back, showing the isolated laboratory nestled in the quiet countryside. But their peace is about to be shattered by a legion of soldiers, addressing someone named Halfas. The entire army is assembled, ready to attack at a moment's notice. From the hills, they gaze down upon their target, Werner's isolated laboratory. This is Halfas, a lower executive of the Divine Light cult, and she's clearly enjoying this. Her strategy is simple and brutal, a full-scale assault from all directions. Subtlety is not her strong suit. She rallies her soldiers, promising a bloodbath for Kei-sensei's disciple by dawn. Her troops roar in approval, chanting their leader's motto of speed and strength. Halfas lets out a wild laugh, reveling in the promise of destruction. But her celebration is cut short as a messenger kneels with an urgent report. Inside, Werner and Hadi have stepped out, aware they are no longer alone. Halfas smirks, pleased that her target has decided to come out and play. Werner calmly walks forward, noting that his opponent seems to think he's weak. Halfas decides she'll just crush him quickly and be done with it. With a raised hand, she changes the plan, ordering all troops to prepare their weapons. The army readies for an all-out assault, their fastest and strongest attack. But Werner simply brings a finger to his lips, a silent signal for what's to come. Halfas screams the order, telling her soldiers to trample their target into dust. The cult's army charges forward, a wave of steel and fury aimed at the lone laboratory. Werner turns to his tiny companion, giving her a simple, confident command. And with a deafening roar, Hadi unleashes her true, magnificent form. The Elder Dragon stands ready, a terrifying answer to their overwhelming numbers. Werner gives Hati the signal, confirming she's cleared to engage. He then activates his latest invention, a powerful barrier generator. The soldiers can only point in terror as the Elder Dragon circles above. Halfas screams her orders. She'll handle the dragon while they kill Werner. She unleashes a devastating blast of dark magic, aiming to end it all at once. But her attack slams harmlessly against a newly formed crystalline shield. Werner stands completely unfazed as her ultimate attack dissipates. Halfas's brain seems to have short-circuited, unable to process this outcome. And while she's distracted, Hadi prepares her own counterattack from above. A storm of draconic fire rains down, turning the battlefield into an inferno. Werner calmly infuses his device with magic, reinforcing its structure. The barrier then unleashes a volley of dark energy blasts upon the cult's army. The soldiers can only watch in horror as their own attack is turned against them. The battlefield erupts in chaos as the cultists are completely annihilated. Halfas screams in utter disbelief, her entire army wiped out in an instant. With the threat neutralized, Werner calmly declares the durability test a success. Hadi is absolutely ecstatic, cheering for her master's incredible power. But Werner is already lost in thought, considering how to resize his new toy. Just then, a new voice calls out, praising his work as impressive as ever. A large, cheerful man named Eugen approaches, asking about the new experiment. Werner explains to a curious Hati that this is a merchant from his academy days. Eugen says Birgitta told him where to find Werner, and he's come to do business. Werner is grateful but questions if Eugen should risk his contracts with the capital. But Eugen insists he's always been a fan of the magic tools Werner creates. He explains that since Werner's departure, the academy's products have become junk. The new head of the Merchant Association is apparently making things much worse, a fact the headmaster and his cronies are beginning to realize with dawning horror. The new supplier holds up one of his supposedly revolutionary new items. This is Gerald, and he's proudly presenting a tool that turns water into hot water. His client can only sweat bullets, forced to praise the high performance of the junk. Gerald smugly calls his water heating device a masterpiece of his own design. But the moment he sets it down, it shatters into 1,000 useless pieces. So much for that revolution. The client can only stare in utter disbelief, demanding to know what just happened. Gerald calmly explains that a slightly modified piece of junk is, at the end of the day, still junk. He then presents a handful of other so-called innovations from the Academy, and proceeds to smash every single one of them into dust before the terrified client. He holds up the fragments, declaring that everything the Academy now produces is garbage. He reveals he helped oust Werner and donated to the Academy for a very specific reason. He reminds the man that Werner is a genius who single-handedly advanced their field by centuries. And with a twisted smile, Gerald reveals his true plan, to monopolize Kei-sensei's legacy for himself. The terrified client can only agree, realizing he's been trapped by their contract. Gerald explains that failure to uphold an agreement comes with a penalty, a merchant's law. The man and his associates beg for mercy, but their pleas fall on deaf ears. Gerald reveals his method of payment, a rather large and ominous-looking syringe. He declares he'll extract his payment directly from their bodies, a chilling promise. The injection will apparently make them useful to his mysterious benefactors. Back at the lab, Eugen prepares to depart after his business with Werner. But before he leaves, he hands Werner a sealed letter addressed to him. Werner takes the envelope, curious about who could be contacting him now. He opens it, his eyes widening as he reads the unexpected message inside. Eugen explains that Kei-sensei sent him a letter before he arrived, addressed to Werner. Werner reads the message, wondering what his mentor could possibly want now. The letter begins, with Kei-sensei correctly guessing he's planning to build his own lab. She's apparently living her best life building a vacation lab on a southern island. Must be nice. She knows he lacks the funds and connections, so she's arranged a solution: sell his inventions to Eugen. But the letter isn't finished. There's one final request for her favorite student. Eugen asks what the request is, and Werner seems to have an idea. He holds up the very device he just finished testing, offering it as a sample. Haiti immediately recognizes it as the powerful barrier generator from the battle. Eugen is stunned as Werner casually shrinks it down, amazed by its compact power. Werner explains that the barrier can expand to cover the entire area. He then casually adds that he can make it even bigger if needed. Eugen is completely floored, realizing it's larger than the capital's own defenses. Werner admits that mass-producing something this powerful will be a challenge. Eugen agrees, noting that a tool's true value is in its accessibility. But even as a prototype, he declares it's a masterpiece he absolutely must have. He invites Werner to his shop in the capital to finalize their new contract. With a firm handshake, a powerful new business alliance is forged. As Eugen departs, Werner decides it's time to take care of some personal business. He's next seen hiding near a building, his expression serious and focused. Meanwhile, the sole survivor of the cult's army, Halphus, stumbles through the aftermath. Battered and bruised, she refuses to accept her humiliating defeat, vowing this isn't over. She remembers the overwhelming power that crushed her, an enemy she could never hope to beat. And she knows the brutal penalty for returning to her masters with nothing to show for it. As Werner and Hadi leave the merchant's shop, he senses they're being watched from afar. But Halphus's expression isn't just rage. It's a strange mix of awe and something else. With a new plan forming, she launches herself towards the building Werner just left. She realizes that even if she can't win in a direct confrontation, she can still break in and take what she wants. Guess subtlety really isn't her thing. She declares that she will at least return with the spoils of her mission. Halphus slips inside, noting the building is completely empty, but her eyes widen in shock at what she finds in the storeroom. Shelves are lined with dozens of identical, ominous-looking spheres. She holds one, realizing she's found a stockpile of new model bombs. Nearby, she discovers something even more valuable, the original design documents. A wicked grin spreads across her face. This is more than enough to erase her failure. She flips through the pages, finding the complete experimental records. Looks like someone's security is a little lax. The documents detail the bomb's history, from its mining origins to its use against the rebels. And on the final page, she sees the name and face of the original developer, Werner Schutreich. Halphus stares at the report, the full weight of her discovery finally sinking in. A slow, sinister chuckle begins to echo through the empty storeroom. It all clicks into place. Kei-sensei's disciple, his impossible power. It all makes sense now. She realizes Werner is the hidden one, the cult's most elusive and dangerous enemy. The documents confirm it. He's the one who developed the bomb that plagued them for years. With this information, she's not just saved, she's guaranteed a promotion. She imagines herself rising through the ranks, becoming a top executive of the Divine Light cult. A wild, triumphant laugh escapes her lips, echoing her deranged ambition. But her celebration is cut short by a faint, rhythmic beeping sound. The bomb in her hand begins to glow, its detonation sequence suddenly activated. So much for that promotion. A strap shoots out, binding the device to her arm as her face twists in pure terror. The beeping spreads as every single bomb on every shelf begins to glow. A flashback reveals Werner's grim realization of what he had to do. He explains he had one final task before leaving his old research behind. He couldn't risk someone misusing his work after he was gone. So, he attached a remote detonation device to all the new model bombs. The devices sparked to life, their countdowns reaching their final seconds. His final instruction was to activate the sequence before their departure. Halfas can only scream as his final command echoes. Blow it all up. Looks like that promotion is officially off the table. And with a deafening roar, the entire building is consumed by the blast. Werner looks back, confirming the demolition is complete, his past now erased. With his past settled, Werner decides it's time to follow Eugen to the capital. He lays out his plan, negotiate with the merchants, and find a good plot of land for his lab. He knows there's a mountain of work ahead, but his resolve is firm. After all, everything he does is for the sake of his ultimate research life. Haiti eagerly volunteers to help, ready to prove her worth as his new assistant. In a flash, she begins to transform back into her true, massive form. With Werner on her back, she takes to the skies. Having a dragon for a taxi is certainly a perk. He thanks her for the help, and she happily replies it was her pleasure. With their business concluded, they soar towards the capital to begin the next phase. Meanwhile, Crown Prince Klaus receives a stunning report on Werner's recent activities. The prince notes that after blowing up his own lab, Werner came straight here. His aide recounts the sheer panic as Werner arrived on the back of an elder dragon. Now inside, Werner and Hadi are greeted by a man who welcomes him back. The man opens a door, explaining there's someone he'd like Werner to meet. And through the door steps Princess Charlotte, the very same Lauda from the capital gate. She seems incredibly flustered, her face flushed with a deep blush. She apologizes for not being able to thank him properly during their last encounter. With a brilliant smile, she offers her heartfelt gratitude once more for his help. Werner, however, just stares back with a look of complete and utter confusion. She's horrified to realize he has absolutely no memory of who she is. So much for a fateful reunion. The prince explains it's probably for the best that Werner didn't recognize her. Werner smirks, revealing he's well aware of her home, the Lamette Kingdom. A map reveals the political turmoil. An enemy empire is encroaching on their borders. The prince recounts how Charlotte's royal guard was ambushed and annihilated on her journey. Werner sips his tea, having already deduced the attackers were imperial agents. The prince notes the academy Werner recommended is the very one built by Kei-sensei. But Charlotte explains that with spies everywhere, the academy is no longer safe for her. And so the prince makes a formal request on behalf of the royal family. He asks Werner to take the princess on as his apprentice, earning a classic spit take. Even Charlotte is stunned by the proposal, her mind reeling at the very idea. Werner is still reeling, realizing the academy will be a constant thorn in his side. But the prince simply declares he'll solve everything with his royal authority. Soon they stand at a new site, with Hadi excited for a lab to be built. It turns out his sister, Birgit, has already prepared a plot of land on their family estate. Werner can only look on, surprised by the help from the family he ran from. And the construction crew is a group of impossibly muscular men flexing with gusto. He explains to a bewildered Charlotte that the prince specially summoned this crew. They're the Valgram Merchant Association, the most elite craftsmen in the entire capital. Werner watches them work, impressed by their incredible speed and precision. Charlotte, however, feels like a burden, apologizing for causing him so much trouble. But Werner's keen eye immediately spots a critical flaw in the plan. The entire plot of land is situated on a massive, uneven slab of bedrock. It's too hard to cut and too irregular to build on, making any foundation unstable. The lead craftsman, however, declares this is the very challenge they live for. With a mighty roar, he rallies his men to solve the problem the old-fashioned way. They intend to smash the bedrock into submission with their bare hands, because of course they do. But their combined might proves completely ineffective against the stubborn stone. Soon, their tools are shattered, and the foreman can only lament their failure. Someone suggests explosives, but that would risk destroying the surrounding estate. Charlotte worries aloud, asking if she can help as Werner watches the chaos unfold. But Werner looks at his miniaturized barrier device, a brilliant idea sparking to life. He calmly approaches the foreman, asking to borrow one of their tools. The man can only point to a pile of shattered equipment, their best efforts broken. Werner simply picks up a splintered wooden handle, declaring it's more than enough. With a surge of focus, he prepares to show them how a true master works. The foreman watches in utter confusion, wondering what he could possibly be planning. Werner channels raw magic into the wood, reforging it with ethereal flames. He then embeds the core of his barrier device, combining magic and technology. In a flash of light, he creates a massive, magically infused pile driver. The crew can only stare in awe as the new tool materializes before them. Guess brute force wasn't the answer after all. He hands the foreman his new creation, telling him to give it a try. With a single earth-shattering blow, the device pulverizes the bedrock. The foreman is speechless. A hole now sits where they couldn't even make a scratch. Werner explains he added a rotating mechanism to drill with minimal effort. The tip is also reinforced with a barrier, allowing it to pierce almost anything. He can only make 4 for now, but promises they'll be mass-produced soon. With a confident smile, he declares the problem officially solved. The foreman admits he doesn't understand any of the complex mechanics, but he grabs Werner's hand, saying there's one thing he knows for sure. And that's that Werner is his savior, a fact he expresses with a rib-crushing hug. The foreman enthusiastically thanks Werner, who is clearly not used to this much affection. He's completely overwhelmed, trapped in the powerful craftsman's grateful embrace. Charlotte can only watch the bizarre scene unfold, her eyes wide with surprise. But her surprise quickly melts into a look of pure admiration and resolve. With their new tools and renewed spirits, the foreman rallies his men back to work. The entire crew roars in response, their morale now higher than ever before. In what feels like no time at all, a magnificent new laboratory stands complete. The crew poses proudly, having finished the job well ahead of schedule. Magic tools and muscles are a winning combo. With the work finally done, Charlotte approaches Werner, a serious look on her face. She nervously clasps her hands, formally renewing her request to be his apprentice. With a deep bow, Charlotte formally asks Werner to take her on as his apprentice. Werner considers her request, his tiny dragon assistant looking on curiously. His first order isn't for some grand magical task, but for her to buy water and firewood. She's understandably confused by the mundane request, but he simply confirms it. He explains that even the simplest materials are necessary for the research ahead. The reality of her new life sinks in, and her face lights up with pure, unadulterated joy. Werner dismisses her, telling her to take an escort back for her own safety. She walks through the capital streets humming happily, lost in the thought of her new master. But her cheerful walk is cut short as she's violently grabbed from behind. She looks back in horror to find her entire royal escort unconscious on the ground. Charlotte cries out, seeing the last of her guards fall to the ground. Before she can even turn to run, she's violently yanked off her feet. She's surrounded by hooded figures, their dark intentions closing in. A grimy hand clamps over her mouth, silencing any hope of a scream. They drag her into a dark room, her hard-earned supplies spilling onto the floor. Her captors mock her fallen escort, dismissing them as completely useless. A scarred man with a twisted grin declares she'll be perfect bait for his revenge. The horrifying realization dawns on her. They're using her to lure someone out. The room is a mess of shattered goods as her captor's maniacal laugh echoes. And back at the lab, her master is busy with very important dragon hygiene. A lone guard, the sole survivor of the escort, rushes back to the lab in a panic. He breathlessly reports the devastating news. Princess Charlotte has been abducted. A royal official confirms they're in pursuit, but the culprits are still at large. But one of the attackers left something behind, a message specifically for Werner. He opens the note, its message stained with blood, a clear and brutal threat. Haiti panics, insisting they have to rush to the rescue immediately. But Werner tells her to stay behind. This is something he must handle alone. His eyes narrow with cold certainty. He already knows exactly who's behind this. He gives a simple order. Tell the royal guards to stand down and not interfere, because backup is for people who aren't walking superweapons. Werner walks into the old experimental building of the Sage's Academy, right into the lion's den. He announces his arrival, his expression cold and unyielding. And there they are, the headmaster and his lackey holding the princess hostage. Werner confirms their identities, noting that even fools can read a simple note. With his target here, the headmaster declares the bait is no longer needed. He shoves Charlotte forward, but Werner moves in a flash to catch her. The hooded subordinate lunges, his blade crackling with deadly electrical magic. He unleashes the full force of his attack, screaming for Werner's demise. The blast rips through the room, kicking up a massive cloud of dust and debris. But as the smoke begins to clear, a familiar shape emerges from the chaos. A crystalline barrier stands firm, having absorbed the entire attack without a scratch. Werner holds his barrier device completely unfazed, with Charlotte safe behind him. He stands on a small island of intact floor, surrounded by the blast's aftermath. He calmly notes that his opponent's magic has grown considerably stronger. The headmaster can only snarl, enraged by Werner's casual dismissal of his power. His mind flashes back to the endless humiliation he's suffered since Werner's departure. His body begins to twist and contort, warped by a dark, borrowed power. All of his rage and failure is focused on a single name, Werner Schuttreit. The now monstrous headmaster screams that everything is entirely Werner's fault. He vows to kill Werner and then send the princess right after him to the grave. Werner just sighs, admitting he doesn't get the grudge, and tells him to be quiet. The subordinate slams his hand down, activating a summoning circle on the floor. An army of strange, one-eyed constructs rises from the ground surrounding them. The headmaster gloats, revealing he personally modified Werner's old magic tools. He unleashes his new army, asking how Werner will handle his own creations. Charlotte lets out a terrified scream as the constructs charge forward, but Werner simply cracks his knuckles, a look of realization on his face. In a flash, he moves through the attack, effortlessly dismantling the machines. He holds up a piece of the wreckage, confirming they're his old designs. But he notes that the headmaster added far too many useless functions. This overloaded the connections, making them powerful but incredibly fragile. So much for an upgrade. He notes that they're so poorly made, he could probably break them barehanded. The headmaster declares that such petty tricks won't work against him now. Werner ignores the villain's monologue, telling Charlotte he's untying her ropes. The headmaster is more interested in the source of Werner's increased magic. He suggests Werner should just surrender like a grown-up and save them both time. A twisted, drooling grin spreads across his face, certain of his victory. But on the floor, one of the deactivated constructs begins to glow. Ropes suddenly erupt from the wreckage, ensnaring both Werner and the princess. The headmaster gloats that he added a capture function to the machines. Guess he had one good idea after all. Werner examines the ropes, not with fear, but with simple analytical curiosity. The headmaster gloats that with Werner's movement sealed, it's finally over. His subordinate then unveils their final trump card, a massive magic cannon. Charlotte can only stare in horror, asking what that monstrous thing is. Werner, however, seems more annoyed than afraid, asking what they plan to do. The subordinate just laughs, typing in the firing sequence for their grand finale. But with a surge of power, Werner shatters his bonds with contemptuous ease. Charlotte looks on in utter disbelief, her eyes wide with shock. The cannon unleashes a devastating blast, aimed to obliterate everything in its path. The headmaster smirks, admitting Werner is an impressive magic tool user. But he sneers that without his toys, Werner is completely and utterly useless. The headmaster reveals his true trump card, a glowing crystal he prepared just for this moment. Werner looks on, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. A flashback reveals it's a medical device he once designed to absorb ambient magic for patients. But the headmaster smirks, explaining he's exploiting its greatest flaw. It doesn't just absorb ambient magic, it drains all nearby magic tools, storing their power. He grabs Werner, taunting him that he should understand the consequences. Charlotte realizes in horror that all of Werner's tools are now completely useless. The headmaster unleashes the stored energy, screaming for them to die together. A massive wave of pure magical force erupts, consuming everything in its path. But even in the heart of the blast, the ropes binding Werner begin to snap. Charlotte can only watch in shock as the ropes binding her suddenly snap. The entire structure around them shatters, unable to contain the raw magical force. But Werner stands at the center of the storm, the energy swirling around him. The headmaster's face twists into a victorious sneer, certain he's finally won. He and his subordinates celebrate, believing their ultimate weapon has made them invincible. He then turns to Charlotte, declaring she'll be the final test subject for his power. But Werner's voice cuts through the chaos, announcing this is her first lesson. He explains that a magic tool user is, by definition, someone who uses magic. Seems obvious when you say it out loud. And with a single step, he crushes the chaotic energy underfoot, bringing it to heel. He stands before Charlotte, explaining that of course they can use magic without their tools. The headmaster can only stare in disbelief, demanding to know how this is possible. Werner calmly explains that he's not a magic tool user, but a researcher. He clarifies that he only learned magic because it was necessary for his work. He then turns the question back on them, asking about the headmaster's sudden power-up. Werner muses that it must be some unknown magic tool he's never seen before. He promises to take his time and analyze it thoroughly, after this is all over. The headmaster and his subordinate can only tremble, their confidence completely shattered. The subordinate panics, telling his boss it's time to use their final trump card. But the headmaster hesitates, knowing that using it means there's no going back. His subordinate pulls out a syringe, threatening to force the issue if he doesn't comply. Looks like this partnership has run its course. The subordinate doesn't wait for an answer, plunging the syringe into the headmaster's neck. The headmaster's hand clenches in agony as the unknown substance floods his system. His body convulses, a guttural scream tearing from his throat as the transformation begins. Through the pain, he mutters that he should have embraced this power from the very start. In a grotesque display, both he and his subordinate warp into demonic monsters. Werner pulls Charlotte behind him, shielding her from the horrifying sight. The subordinate, now a three-eyed beast, boasts of his newfound, overwhelming power. But Werner's focus is on the injection, calmly analyzing the source of their transformation. The creature raises a hand, summoning a dark, ominous magic circle above them. Tendrils of pure darkness lash out, a final desperate attack aimed at our hero. The dark magic slams down, tearing the room apart in a chaotic blast. But Werner simply raises a hand, erecting a new barrier to shield them from the assault. He notes their magic has spiked, a curious detail in the middle of a death match. The monstrous headmaster sneers, declaring that this is only the beginning of their power. His subordinate then points to a display case, ordering his boss to use its contents. With a swipe of its claws, the monster shatters the glass, revealing what's inside. It reaches for the object, a new source of power to fuel its rage. The two beasts stand ready, preparing to unleash another wave of destruction. This is getting a little repetitive, guys. But then, the headmaster's form begins to dissolve into particles of dark energy. His body is completely absorbed by his subordinate, who now stands alone, empowered by the sacrifice. The monster holds up the crystal, expanding its range to absorb all nearby magic. Far away in the capital, a chef's magical stove suddenly sputters out. The flame dies in an instant, leaving the kitchen in sudden silence. The chef can only stare in confusion, wondering if his equipment is broken. On the streets, citizens cry out in alarm as the magical streetlights flicker and die. A woman looks around in shock as the entire district is plunged into darkness. Reports flood the royal palace. All magic tools in the central district have failed. Prince Klaus can only wonder what catastrophic event is unfolding in his city. Back at the academy, the crystal glows with stolen power, fueled by the city's lifeblood. Werner realizes the horrifying truth. They've drained the magic from the entire capital. The monster sneers, recognizing the familiar power of Werner's barrier. It taunts him, saying that a shield built for one is useless now. Werner calmly asks what the creature is trying to prove with its monologue. The beast just grins, asking if he truly doesn't understand the situation. It reveals that Werner is no longer the primary target of its attack. With a grand gesture, it points to the sprawling city below them. Its true target is the entire capital, now defenseless without its magic. It mocks his shield, noting it can only protect the area immediately around him. For the first time, a flicker of genuine concern crosses Werner's face. The beast reveals its plan, to unleash the capital's stolen magic back upon it. Talk about a terrible return policy. The monster offers a twisted form of mercy, a final, cruel choice. It tells Werner to take his own life, and in exchange, the capital will be spared. The beast grins, confident that it has finally cornered the genius researcher. For a moment, Werner's expression is unreadable, his face cast in shadow. But his answer comes not in words, but in the familiar glow of a barrier. He stands firm, ready to defy the monster's ultimatum and protect his apprentice. The beast accepts his decision, summoning dark forces from the very ground beneath them. A massive array of magic circles materializes, crackling with stolen energy. This is not going to be a small explosion. The monster declares that both Werner and the capital are an eyesore to its grand design. It promises to wipe them all from existence, turning them to ash in a single final attack. The monster unleashes its final attack, a storm of energy meant to erase everything. The blast tears through the air, a wave of pure, unbridled annihilation. But Werner simply whispers 2 words: coordinate correction. Far away in the capital, a single hexagonal barrier flickers into existence. With a flick of his wrist, he begins duplicating it across the same plane. His fingers move in a blur, counting out hundreds of barriers in mere seconds. His eyes reflect the complex array, refining a total of 1,500 layers. In an instant, a massive, multi-layered dome covers the entire capital city. Talk about over-engineering a solution. Werner looks up at his handiwork, calmly declaring that this should be enough. The monster's ultimate attack slams into the shield, its power completely nullified. The dark energy shatters harmlessly against the city-wide shield. The monster can only stare in disbelief, muttering that this is impossible. Werner calmly explains that he can't just deploy a barrier anywhere he pleases, but with the right coordinates, he can project one anywhere he needs to. Charlotte is stunned, unable to grasp how even a high-ranking mage could do this. Werner just smiles, declaring it's impossible for a magic tool user to be weaker than a mage. The monster seethes with rage, its ultimate plan completely undone. It screams that it will just absorb more magic, reaching for the crystal again. Guess it's time for round 2 of Drain the City, but a massive crystalline structure erupts from the ground beneath it. The beast is impaled from all sides, its final gambit cut short in an instant. Werner explains the crystal's fatal flaw to a stunned Charlotte. It absorbs magic indiscriminately, which is why it was locked away as a defect. The monster can only roar in defiance, trapped and powerless against its own weapon. But Werner's expression is cold, his patience clearly at an end. He calmly adjusts his collar, preparing to deploy his own magic. The crystalline prison begins to tear the beast apart from the inside out. With a single word, Werner commands the structure to dismantle its target. He notes that leaving such an unstable creature alive is simply too dangerous. The 2 demonic forms crumble into dust, their borrowed power finally failing them. With the threat neutralized, Werner walks out of the wreckage without a second glance. The subordinate's monstrous form lets out a final, silent scream of agony. The headmaster's borrowed power dissolves into nothingness, his ambition ending in dust. With the threat gone, Werner calmly gathers the remaining magical energy. He watches as the stolen power begins to flow back into the capital. Across the district, the magical lights flicker back to life one by one. He turns to Charlotte, asking if she's unharmed after the dangerous ordeal. But she can only respond with a tearful, desperate hug, relieved he's safe. She clings to him, admitting just how terrified she was for his sake. And just in time for the group hug, Hadi arrives to check on her master. Just then, Prince Klaus's royal guard arrives, apologizing for their tardiness. The guard notes that while they came to assist, the situation appears to be resolved. He then requests that Werner accompany him to the castle to give a full report. The man looks over the utter devastation, wondering how he's supposed to explain any of this. Werner tries to make an excuse, but the guard insists he must come by order of the prince. As he's led away, Werner can only imagine the royal scolding that awaits him. But inside the palace, Prince Klaus bows his head in sincere and profound gratitude. Werner is completely baffled, wondering why on earth he's being thanked. The prince clarifies that he's grateful not just for saving Charlotte, but for protecting the entire capital. Werner breathes a quiet sigh of relief, realizing he's not in trouble after all. Klaus continues, revealing the headmaster has been officially arrested for high treason. The prince explains the 2 traitors are now locked away, likely for life. Werner's response is a calm, almost indifferent, "Is that so?" He admits the whole incident was certainly a troublesome distraction. But Klaus has another question, pointing to the fragments of their transformation devices. He explains they're a more advanced version of the collars once used on Hadi. The prince then asks the critical question, can Werner replicate them? Werner just waves it off, claiming such a thing is currently impossible to create. Later, Klaus reveals their investigation has traced the collaborators to the Galatea Empire. He reflects on Werner's words, a magic tool that even he called impossible. And he's left to wonder if a genius rivaling Werner exists within the enemy nation. Far away, in a shadowed throne room, a hidden figure laments their recent failure. But a veiled woman assures them there is no need to worry. She reveals their next move is already in motion, a new plan for victory. After all, they have a secret weapon, the so-called Child of Light. 2 days later, back at the lab, a new morning begins. Werner slowly wakes up, the events of the past few days finally behind him. He recalls falling asleep after his long debriefing with the prince, but he quickly realizes he's not alone in his bed. With a jolt, he throws back the covers, his eyes wide with disbelief, because Hati is right there beside him, sleeping soundly in her human form. Well, this is awkward. A piercing scream suddenly shatters the morning calm. It's Charlotte, grabbing Werner in a panic, demanding to know what's going on. Hati wakes up, calmly explaining that it's not good to sleep all bundled up. She adds that it's a dragon custom to huddle together for warmth when tired. A flustered Charlotte begs Werner not to look, and he immediately turns away. Hati decides to solve the awkwardness by pulling Charlotte into a group hug. As Charlotte tries to explain human decency, the bedroom door begins to swing open. A hand slams against the frame as someone calls out Werner's name. It's his sister, Birgitta, rushing in to see what all the screaming was about. And she walks in on a scene that is going to be incredibly hard to explain. Werner can only lament that his life is once again becoming a troublesome affair. After a lengthy and no doubt awkward explanation, the situation is finally cleared up. At the breakfast table, Birgitta calmly admits that she may have jumped to conclusions. Werner breathes a sigh of relief, hoping to avoid any more chaotic misunderstandings. But his sister has other news, revealing a letter has arrived from the academy. It seems the old headmaster has been replaced, and the new staff is requesting his presence. Werner is hesitant to return, but he's also curious about the fate of his old research. He realizes the mastermind who modified his tools is still at large, solidifying his decision. He tells Charlotte and Hati to prepare to leave with him just in case things get messy. Birgitta offers to walk with them, as her own business takes her near the academy grounds. Birgitta explains she'll be away for a while inspecting the border defenses. Werner questions if she really needs to handle the task personally. She confirms it's her duty as the next head of the family. Guess responsibility runs in the family, just in different ways. As she prepares to depart, Charlotte watches on. But Werner stops her, handing over a familiar-looking pendant. He explains it's a portable barrier device for her own protection. He also gives her a communication device just in case, because of course he has a full safety kit ready to go. With a serious look, he tells her to be careful on her journey. She smiles warmly, telling him to do the same. And so the group arrives at their destination, the Sage's Academy. They step into the familiar halls of the Academy, a place of complicated memories. A voice from above thanks Werner for returning to this place once more. She introduces herself as Fiona Lentledge, the Academy's new headmaster. Werner recognizes her, surprised to see her in the top position. He recalls she had a good reputation, though he adds it was nothing compared to his own. Fiona reveals she was one of many who fought against his unjust expulsion. She clenches her fist, wishing she could have punished the traitors herself. Someone's holding a grudge. But Werner is already over it, asking only for his old research to be returned. The new headmaster simply asks him to follow her deeper into the building. She explains that a mere apology won't cover the damage the old regime caused. She leads him to a specific door, gesturing for him to enter. She hopes that what's inside will serve as some small form of atonement. Werner steps inside to find his old laboratory just as he left it. He's stunned, admitting he assumed the old headmaster had destroyed everything. Fiona explains she couldn't stop his expulsion, but she saved what she could. She reveals she's gathered all of his stolen research and magic tools. With a deep bow, she offers another sincere apology for the Academy's past actions. She admits it's a shameless request after everything that's happened. But she asks him to consider returning to the Academy to continue his work. Werner turns back, declaring that the Sage's Academy needs him. You have to admire the confidence. Fiona sweetens the deal, offering back pay and complete creative control. She's willing to do whatever it takes to get him back, even offering her own position. But Werner's answer is a simple and unwavering refusal to return. Disappointed but understanding, she asks if he'll at least share his reasons. He explains it's not a grudge, he just prefers the freedom of his own research. Besides, he now has a new priority, focusing on his apprentice's training. Charlotte can't help but blush, still getting used to her new title. Fiona accepts his decision, respecting his wishes with a sad smile. But she makes a counteroffer. His lab will remain his, free to use whenever he wants. He can lecture and research as he pleases, an arrangement Werner gratefully accepts. Fiona seems a bit surprised as Hati perches on her head, demanding her gratitude. The tiny dragon proudly introduces herself as Hati, Werner's loyal servant. The new headmaster is completely flustered by the sudden, adorable declaration. Her professional demeanor melts away as she offers Hadi a snack, admitting her weakness for cute things. As Werner explains how the lab was restored, a familiar voice calls out his name. A cheerful young woman appears, introducing herself as Kurl, a graduate of the academy. Werner clarifies that she's one of his former students, and she bows politely. She happily recalls her time under his tutelage, honored to help restore his lab. Looks like our boy made a good impression on at least one person here. Eugen arrives, noting that he heard she was working for him now. But Kurl reveals she has another reason for being here. She's been put in charge of a new design project. Kurl explains her project, designing a new ship that requires a massive amount of magic stones. She admits they're struggling to find enough, as stones powerful enough to move a ship are incredibly rare. Hadi chimes in, suggesting they just split the ones they have, earning a skeptical look from Charlotte. Kurl explains the problem. Magic stones are too brittle and shatter into dust if you try to cut them. She sighs, admitting that no researcher has ever found a way to divide a magic stone without destroying it. But Werner just smiles, holding up a crystal and telling Kurl that's not entirely true. His former student can only stare, wondering what he could possibly mean. He then picks up a simple hammer and chisel, tools that seem destined for failure. As he prepares to strike the priceless crystal, Kurl looks on in absolute horror. And with a sharp tap, he brings the hammer down, ready to defy the laws of magic once again. Because of course he is. Kurl panics as the crystal fractures, certain he's about to destroy it. But instead of shattering, the stone splits cleanly into two perfect halves. She can only stare in disbelief, realizing it hasn't turned to dust at all. Werner explains that every magic stone has a core and veins of flowing magic. The trick, he reveals, is to cut along the grain without damaging that central core. He holds up the pieces, admitting he only discovered this through trial and error. Miraculously, the two new fragments are in the exact same state as the original. A diagram confirms it. The core's power remains unchanged, effectively duplicating the stone. So much for the laws of conservation of energy. Kurl's eyes widen as the full weight of his discovery begins to sink in. With a confident flourish, Werner reveals he's literally turned one magic stone into two. Kurl stammers, realizing the magical light hasn't weakened in the slightest. With this method, a single stone can now generate double the power. They could build entire fleets of magic-powered ships, revolutionizing trade. She can only swallow hard, the implications of his discovery sinking in. It's not just ships. The entire capital runs on these stones. The economic impact is staggering. She asks where he found this knowledge, as it's not in any known text. Werner just smirks, casually revealing he figured it out yesterday. Kurl's mind is officially blown, her expression a perfect mix of awe and disbelief. He clarifies there's a limit. The stones can only be duplicated once. But even doubling their resources is enough to solve countless problems, a fact she celebrates with an excited handstand. Kurl bows deeply, thanking Werner for solving her seemingly impossible problem. She feels a bit guilty for bothering him, even after graduating from the academy. But Werner just smiles, telling her that she will always be one of his students. Her face lights up, and she promises to come to him whenever she needs help. The new headmaster, Fiona, watches their heartwarming exchange from a distance. She smiles, admitting to herself that she may have made a regrettable decision. She compares Werner's insight and leadership to that of the Academy's legendary founder, but a single thought lingers in her mind as she considers his true potential. She realizes a man like Werner could never be contained by a simple teaching position. Guess she'll have to settle for genius in residence. Later, the group walks through the streets, Hadi happily flying with a bag of snacks from Fiona. Charlotte is amazed by the crate of tools, but Werner just calls it a daily routine. He pulls out a specific device, explaining it's a magic tool for sending danger signals. The device works using two stones, perfectly tuned to resonate with one another. He reveals he gave the other half to his sister Birgitte before she left. If she channels magic into her stone, his will light up in response. But just as he explains this, the device in his hand suddenly shatters into pieces. Werner's calm demeanor vanishes, his eyes fixed on the broken magic stone. He realizes the brief flash of light was a signal, a desperate pulse from his sister. But for his stone to break, it means the one she holds was likely destroyed. The horrifying truth sinks in. His sister is in grave danger. Werner's face is a mask of cold, dawning dread. Far away, his sister's convoy travels along a desolate, snowy road. Inside her carriage, Birgitte remarks that her inspection has gone exactly as planned. She holds the device, musing that her overprotective brother worried for nothing. but in an instant, her calm expression shatters into pure shock. A blast of dark energy erupts from the ground, engulfing her carriage. She's thrown violently inside as the world turns upside down. The communication device is ripped from her grasp, shattering in midair. Her guards rush towards the flaming wreckage, screaming her name in panic. Amidst the chaos, Brigitte struggles to help her injured attendant, proving her own resilience. But the attack isn't over. Brigitte senses another surge of powerful magic. A second volley is already screaming through the air towards them. She activates the pendant, her brother's final gift proving its worth. A massive barrier springs to life, deflecting the deadly magical shards. But not before her attendant was struck, a grievous wound bleeding freely. Brigitte applies pressure, her expression grim as the bleeding continues unabated. She desperately calls for a healer, trying to keep her companion conscious. Her loyal guards scramble to form a defensive line around their lady. One of them asks her to lower the barrier so they can administer healing magic. Because of course the healer is on the outside. But Brigitte's focus is elsewhere, realizing she can track the attacks by their magical signature. She clutches the pendant, ordering her men to prepare for healing. Her guard acknowledges the command, ready to move in once the shield is down. With her attendant's life on the line, she steels herself for the risk. But a projectile flies from the trees, shattering the pendant in her hand. She realizes with dawning horror that it wasn't a magical attack. Just as the barrier fails, new magic circles erupt from the ground beneath them. Because of course the real trap was waiting. Tendrils of dark energy lash out, a far more sinister attack springing to life. Brigitte can only watch, her defenses shattered and her men exposed. The attack rips through her royal guard, cutting them down in an instant. Her face is a mask of pure shock, her carefully planned inspection now a bloodbath. Brigitte stands defiant amidst the carnage, her wounded attendant at her side. But just as hope seems lost, Werner arrives on Hadi's back, screaming his sister's name. He lands with a look of pure panic, apologizing for not getting there sooner. He orders Charlotte to focus on healing his sister while he deals with the attackers. From the shadows, a hooded figure reveals a complex magic circle, preparing another assault. Werner braces himself as a new wave of attacks rushes towards them. He gives a single command, calling out Hadi's name with grim determination. And his loyal dragon unleashes a powerful breath attack, intercepting the volley. Werner spots his target in the trees, his own magic circle flaring to life. Guess it's time for some long-range problem-solving. A massive pillar of light erupts from the forest, a clear and devastating response. Werner notes that his attack definitely made contact with its target. The smoke clears, revealing a path of utter destruction through the forest. But his opponent is gone, having already fled the scene. He walks through the scorched earth, debating whether to give chase. But something on the ground catches his attention, stopping him in his tracks. Pinned to a tree is a letter, a message left behind just for him. The voice of the attacker echoes, addressing Werner by his full name. It's a clear warning. Stay out of their way and stop interfering. The threat is simple and brutal. If he doesn't, more blood will be spilled. Guess subtlety isn't their strong suit. Back at the border estate, Werner rushes to check on his sister's condition. A doctor confirms his sister's treatment was successful, and she's asking for him. Werner tells Charlotte and Hadi that he'll be back in a moment. He pushes open the heavy ornate doors to her private chambers. As he steps inside, Brigitte calmly greets him from across the room. She's bandaged over one eye and on her cheek, but seems remarkably composed. He asks about her injuries, but she assures him she'll be fine with some rest. She holds up the shattered remains of the barrier pendant he gave her. She credits his invention with saving her life, calling it an amazing creation. Guess overprotective brothers have their uses. Brigitte reveals she was investigating suspicious movements from the neighboring empire. She tells him not to seek revenge, urging him to focus on his research instead. But her expression hardens, knowing her brother all too well. She knows he won't just let this go, no matter what she says. Werner agrees, telling his sister to share everything she's discovered. She reveals she was acting on a direct request from Prince Klaus himself. They were investigating a shadowy organization known as the Divine Light Cult, an anti-imperial group aiming to topple the government, with the Galatea Empire pulling the strings. Werner realizes the Academy incident was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. The cult has been operating in the shadows, always one step ahead of the authorities. Brigitte comes to a grim conclusion. There must be a traitor in their midst, because of course there's a mole. And her investigation has already identified a prime suspect, a man named Gerald. She identifies Gerald as the head of a merchant guild with deep ties to the academy. He's been suspiciously successful lately, acquiring a host of powerful new magic tools. Acting on this intel, Prince Klaus sent the Royal Knights to investigate the guild's headquarters. But by the time they arrived, the entire operation had vanished without a trace. The attacker's message becomes clear. Werner's actions at the academy crippled their plans, and this was their warning. Werner processes the information, the full scope of the conspiracy finally clicking into place. His sister thanks him one last time, telling him to get some well-deserved rest. But Werner's mind is on the enemy, acknowledging they were serious about taking her life. She pleads with him not to be reckless, urging him to run if the situation turns dire. He gives a quiet reply, but his posture says it all. He has no intention of backing down. He steps out of the room, met by the worried faces of Charlotte and Haiti. Charlotte asks about his sister, her voice trembling with concern. Werner reassures her that Brigitta's life is not in any immediate danger. He then tells them both to get some rest, insisting they've been through enough. Haiti watches him go, sensing her master's quiet, simmering rage. Later that night, Werner is back in his element, meticulously crafting a new tool. He carefully assembles the components, his focus absolute. A bright light emanates from the device as its core activates. He holds the finished product, a new crystal humming with latent power. Looks like someone's gearing up for a little payback. With a look of cold resolve, Werner gets ready to head out. He packs a large case, his preparations for the hunt now complete. But Hadi's voice stops him, reminding him that a home is something you find yourself. She stands before him, her small form filled with an unshakable resolve. Werner turns, caught off guard by her sudden seriousness. She reveals she overheard his entire conversation with his sister. Turns out dragon hearing is pretty good. She insists on coming with him, but Werner warns her of the danger. But Hadi argues back, claiming her dragon senses can track the enemy's scent. With tears in her eyes, she declares her desire to finally be useful to him. Werner can only sigh, realizing he's not going to win this argument. Haiti tells him their first stop is the scene of the attack, ready for the chase. Werner recalls the feeling of his magic hitting its mark, certain the attacker was wounded. He gives Hadi a simple command: follow the scent of blood through the snow. The trail leads them to a remote building, the guild's hidden headquarters. Inside, the empty tavern holds a tense and expectant silence. Deeper within, a voice vows to punish the one who interfered with their plans. The man is Gerald, the very same merchant his sister warned him about. But he's not alone. Two robed figures appear as projections, demanding an explanation. They berate him for his failure, reminding him the prince's forces are already closing in. Looks like the boss has arrived. Gerald can only apologize, knowing he nearly ruined their plan to destroy the kingdom. The figures deliver a final, chilling ultimatum. Their last plan is in motion, and failure is not an option. The robed figures reveal they've given Gerald soldiers with executive-level power. They warn him that another failure will be his last. But Gerald scoffs under his breath, wondering who the real fools are. He dismisses the so-called Child of Light as useless without her magic tools. He straightens his collar, confident in the forces he's been given. Besides, he has his own special magic tool to ensure victory. A device created by the Child of Light herself, designed purely for combat. It contains the power of an ancient dragon, enough to level an entire nation. Talk about bringing a nuke to a knife fight. With this weapon, he's certain even the prince's royal guard is no threat. His true goal is revealed: to profit from a war between the two nations. A subordinate reports to Gerald, who listens with an arrogant smirk. But their meeting is cut short as a guard bursts in, screaming about an intruder. The man's face twists in pure terror as he sees what's coming for him. In an instant, he's consumed by a wave of dark, crystalline energy. Gerald can only watch in shock as his men are cut down with brutal efficiency. Another guard is pinned to the floor by a massive, shadowy blade. Gerald sweats, realizing his grand plan is being interrupted by some very rude guests. A calm voice explains that his men were unfortunately in the way. Werner steps through the wreckage, Hadi on his shoulder, his eyes locked on his target. But a new figure in a helmet steps forward, calling this a convenient turn of events. The helmeted figure gives the command, and his soldiers draw their blades in unison. He declares their target is a lone magic tool user, ordering them to overwhelm him. But Werner moves like a phantom, deflecting a sword with a tool on his arm. The leader can only stare in shock, unable to even track his movements. Werner slips past the grunts, his eyes fixed on a more important target. Realizing his mistake, the helmeted man switches tactics, preparing to cast a spell. But Werner is one step ahead, blowing a tiny projectile from his lips. The enemy's magic circle fizzles into nothing, his spell completely neutralized. Our boy stands unfazed, his counterattack already delivered with pinpoint accuracy. The helmeted figure cries out, clutching his arm as the projectile finds its mark. Werner chides his opponent for using attack magic in such a confined space. The helmeted man can only stare in disbelief, his confidence completely shattered. Werner moves in a blur, taking down another soldier with pure physical skill. The man hits the floor, completely outmatched and outmaneuvered. Gerald trembles, unable to comprehend how he's doing this without magic. Werner adjusts his collar, seemingly disappointed by the lack of a real challenge. A desperate Gerald orders his remaining men to finish the job. The last of the soldiers rush forward, hoping to overwhelm him with numbers. A classic, rarely successful strategy. But one by one, they all fall before him, their attack utterly useless. Werner calmly asks if that's all of them, as Hadi praises his strength. Werner explains that for a magic tool user, this level of combat is simply expected. He recalls the brutal training his old master put him through. Looks like tough love involved giant snakes. But his thoughts are interrupted as he senses something nearby. In a dark corner of the room, a young woman in a maid's uniform sits alone. She looks up, her hair obscuring her face as she identifies herself as a servant. Werner approaches, asking if she was kidnapped by the cult and if she's all right. He leans in, gently asking if she's injured and able to stand on her own. But Hadi suddenly catches a familiar, sinister scent in the air. She points a claw at the maid, screaming that this is the one who attacked his sister. In a flash, the seemingly helpless maid launches a vicious attack. A blade of pure energy erupts from her hand, aimed straight for his heart. Werner twists away, the surprise attack barely missing its mark. He raises an arm, a crystalline shield deflecting the blow at the last second. She follows up by hurling his own case of tools right back at him. The impact sends him stumbling back, kicking up a massive cloud of dust. The maid uses the chaos to her advantage, creating a smokescreen to vanish. But Werner stands his ground, a light in his hand cutting through the haze. He realizes her failed ambush was just a prelude to a tactical retreat. He notes with grim respect that she's clearly a seasoned fighter. In fact, he admits her combat experience might even surpass his own. Looks like the maid service has some intense training programs. Werner turns, his senses screaming as the immediate danger becomes clear. The maid's attacks are relentless, a storm of blades hammering against his shield. He realizes he's trapped. Dropping his guard to attack means taking a fatal hit. But he recalls a faint glow that emanated from her chest during the assault. It's the same chaotic energy he once felt from Hadi's cursed collar. He understands now, she's not an assassin, but a puppet controlled by a magic tool. Still, he knows this stalemate is a losing battle that he has to break. He makes a risky choice, deciding to drop his barrier and go on the offensive. For the first time, a flicker of genuine shock crosses the puppet's face. As the dust settles, Werner stands ready, his gamble now in motion. A device near Werner's ear hums to life, his true plan set in motion. The maid's expression shifts, realizing her opponent's move was a feint. He explains he upgraded his barrier after what happened to his sister. It now activates automatically, detecting any undetectable attack. With a flick of his wrist, he unleashes his true counterattack. He calmly declares that she has now been captured. Glowing restraints erupt from thin air, binding the assassin completely. He reveals his new tool can change shape to match any magical energy. Talk about a one-size-fits-all solution. The maid struggles, realizing she's been completely outplayed and can't move. A bright light flares from her chest, targeting the very tool that controls her. But Werner's expression shifts to alarm as he realizes what's happening. He warns Hadi to be careful, sensing a dangerous shift in the magic. He understands now, the tool isn't just for control, it's a self-destruct device. A flashback reveals the device was once a birthday present, a delicate bracelet. The maid, a young girl named Coralie, was overjoyed by the beautiful gift. Her parents watch on as she worries that the gift was too expensive. But her father just smiles, patting her head and reassuring her. He gently places the bracelet on her wrist, calling it a perfect fit. It was a moment of pure happiness, a memory of a loving family, a family that's about to be torn apart. That memory is shattered by the image of their violent end, their love twisted into a curse. A man reveals her parents were traitors, an inconvenience to his plans. He laments his financial losses, wondering how to solve his little problem. A cruel smile spreads across his face as a twisted idea takes root. He offers a horrifying deal, her life in exchange for her parents' debt. The young girl's world shatters, her face a canvas of pure terror. He praises her potential, molding the broken child into a perfect assassin. The device is modified, a failsafe to ensure she takes her targets with her. Every life she was forced to take made her wish for her own to end. But even that escape was denied, the curse on her chest preventing it. A single tear falls as she apologizes to the parents she couldn't save. She's haunted by the faces of those she was forced to kill. But now she believes her long nightmare is finally over. With a single tear, she welcomes the coming oblivion. But a hand suddenly reaches out, refusing to let her go. Her eyes snap open in shock as someone grabs the device. Her expression shifts from tragic resolve to utter confusion. Guess dying peacefully wasn't on the schedule today. Because Werner has no intention of letting her die on his watch, he analyzes the cursed tool, its true function now laid bare. He begins to reshape the magical energy, a delicate, desperate gambit. His goal, to carefully separate the bomb from its trigger. With a single word, he commands the device to release its hold. The cursed bracelet shatters, and the young assassin collapses to the floor. Werner calmly declares that she's safe now, the threat finally neutralized. But Coralie can only weep, asking why he would possibly save her. She cries that it would have been better if he had just let her die. Werner looks down, his expression firm as he tells her that isn't true. She screams through her tears, confessing she tried to kill both him and his sister. But he calmly explains that her actions were never her own choice. She looks at the shattered device, unable to accept his forgiveness. He gently reassures her, certain that she is not a killer at heart. He gently lifts her chin, noting just how much she's been hurt. He looks her in the eye, repeating that none of this was her fault. Coralie can only stare, his kindness completely disarming her. Her resolve finally crumbles, a whispered apology lost in her tears. The dam breaks, and all her pain and guilt come pouring out at once. After some time, he asks if she's finally calmed down. Werner prepares to hunt down Gerald, but Coralie's voice stops him. She reveals that she knows exactly where the merchant has fled. Looks like our boy just got a new navigator. With a fire in her eyes, she warns they must hurry, as Gerald plans to destroy the entire kingdom. Werner is stunned, realizing the true scale of the enemy's ambition. With no time to waste, Werner tells her to lead him there at once. But as they prepare to leave, Coralie nervously clings to his arm for support. He asks why she's holding on so tight, worried she'll trip in the dark passage. She explains Gerald's plan, to use a weapon based on an ancient dragon's power. His goal isn't just to erase the evidence, but to destroy the entire country. She adds that her own parents were disposed of in a similar fashion. Coralie points ahead, having found the hidden chamber where Gerald is hiding. Werner spots the merchant fleeing and calls out, telling him there's no escape. Gerald can only grit his teeth, his grand scheme falling apart around him. But before Werner can move, Coralie lunges forward, ready to claim her own revenge. With a furious cry, Coralie brings down a blade, ready to end him. The weapon finds its mark, drawing a pained scream from the merchant. Gerald collapses to the floor, his reign of terror seemingly at an end. In a desperate, pathetic plea, he tries to order Coralie to kill Werner. But Werner calmly states the obvious, her strings have already been cut. Gerald can only stammer in disbelief as Coralie vows to never forgive him. She screams out in anguish, ready to finally avenge her murdered parents. With a final cry, she lunges forward to deliver the finishing blow. But a cruel, confident smile suddenly spreads across the merchant's face. Guess he's not a fan of going out gracefully, and Werner's eyes widen in alarm, realizing this fight is far from over. But Werner suddenly grabs Coralie, stopping her killing blow at the last second. She struggles against his hold, screaming his name in pure frustration. He tells her to calm down, but she begs him to let her finish this. But Werner's focus is elsewhere, sensing an immense power radiating from Gerald. The merchant taunts her, pouring a dark, viscous liquid from a strange container. Coralie's eyes widen in pure terror, recognizing the horrifying substance before her. Werner identifies it as a cult magic tool, stunned by its unbelievable power. He notes its energy is refined and flawless, a work of terrifying genius. A vision of a mysterious, elf-like woman flashes through his mind. Gerald reveals the tool was made by the disciple of Werner's own master. Looks like the family reunion is about to get messy. The voice of his master's echoes, mocking how Werner cornered him. But Gerald just laughs, declaring that the game is now over. He boasts that this magic tool will be the end of them all, He'll simply sell off the scraps of their ruined nation for a profit. But the strange liquid begins to crawl up his arm, consuming him. His arrogant smile falters, replaced by confusion and dawning pain. Looks like the user manual didn't mention this part. Far away, the robed figures confirm this was all part of the plan. The veiled woman laughs, revealing the tool requires a living sacrifice to activate. They admit they gave the greedy merchant a role perfectly suited for him. And back in the chamber, Gerald screams as he's consumed, becoming the bait for their true trap. Werner grits his teeth, furious that he never saw this part of the plan. Gerald screams in agony, cursing the name of the one who betrayed him. His body twists and contorts, a final, desperate plea lost in the transformation.